As a series, Bleach is well known for its impressive catalogue of diverse and creative special abilities and powers, and among those abilities none is more revered than the Bankai, the elusive final stage of a Shinigami's Zanpakuto, the culmination of a year's worth of training and often show-stopping displays of incredible power. In this video I'm going to try and do the unthinkable and rank what I believe to be the top 10 strongest Bankai in all of Bleach. Now when I say strongest, I'm not just talking about raw power, although of course that will factor into any positioning on this list. However, it's just one part of a larger criteria. As with my other ranking videos, I like to take an all-encompassing look at the subject matter, so as far as Bankai goes, we'll also be looking at a Bankai's versatility, its unique killing power, and also any potentially broken abilities it might have on the side. And finally, before we kick things off, one last piece of housekeeping. As you can see from the title, this is a manga-only video, which means we'll only be looking at Bankai that appeared during the run of Bleach's manga. However, in the future, I do want to do another list like this one that encompasses all of the supplementary material as well, including the novels. So we'll get characters like Hisagi and Shinji's Bankai, and also slightly more out there Bankais like that of Asashiro. But for now, we're just looking at characters from the manga. Before we begin, guys, if you're a fan of Bleach, you are in the perfect place for content like this every single week, so make sure to hit that subscribe button now. I would really appreciate the support. And also, if you enjoyed the video, whether our lists differed or not, make sure to give it a thumbs up, because it really does help with exposure on YouTube as well. And of course, if you want to take that support a step further, I would really appreciate it. You can now become a channel member by hitting the join button down below, just to show your support for me and what we do here on the channel, and I would really appreciate it. It helps me more than you know. So after much debate, I finally whittled down a list of what I believe to be the top 10 strongest Bankai in the series, plus 2 honourable mentions, and I'm pretty happy with it for the most part, although I feel like you're never going to be truly happy with a list like this. You'll always kind of get some thought in your head later on that this should have gone there, or I maybe forgot this, or something like that. But for now, for the most part, I'm pretty happy. There is one character I want to address who I think people would probably be expecting to see on this list who's not actually here, and that's Ichigo Hyosobe. His Bankai Shirafude Ichimonji is of course very powerful, allowing him to bestow a brand new name onto someone that he has already robbed the name of. However, that's the main reason he hasn't made it onto my top 10 list. I actually don't find his Bankai to be that impressive. Ichimonji is a unique case where the majority of the broken power and ability comes from its Shikai. On my top 10 strongest Zanpakuto list, I actually ranked Ichimonji second, and I stick with that opinion now, but I truly believe most of that comes from the Shikai. Just by splashing ink on his enemy, he can remove their name and all of the power that comes with it. Uniquely, the Bankai here is more complementary than anything else, allowing Ichigo to then go on to change their name to something else, but at that point they've already lost everything as it is. That's not to say the Bankai doesn't have multiple applications both in and outside of battle, because obviously it does. But for me, it doesn't make the list just because it's weird, it's kind of complementary to an already immensely powerful Shikai, whereas most of the Bankai on this list you'll see take their Shikai and blow them out to epic proportions. Alright, kicking things off then with our first honourable mention, and it's actually Seijin Komamura's Kokujo Tengen Myo, or to be more precise, Kokujo Tengen Myo Dangai Joe? Joe? Calling it Joe sounds really weird, but I think he pronounces it Joe in Brave Souls, but I'm not entirely sure. Either way, it's Komamura's Bankai. A few years ago, before the final arc, you would have been laughed out of the room for including Komamura's Bankai anywhere near a top 10 Bankai list. However, after the humanification technique that sees him ripping out his heart to achieve immortality, his Bankai takes on a new form where it sheds its armor and becomes a whole new beast. Now, Komamura's new Bankai is very impressive. The immortality is a nice gimmick that basically means it would be really hard for him to lose any kind of one-on-one fight, as we see when he absolutely decimates the Sternritter Bambietta. Despite attaining what seems to be complete immortality, the reason Komamura's Bankai is only an honourable mention and not anywhere near the actual top half of this list is because it has such colossal drawbacks. Simply by using this ability and attaining this power, Komamura then loses everything. It is a one-time deal. And not only does he lose everything, he becomes a full-on animal as opposed to just an anthropomorphic human animal thing. He can't even hold a Zanpakuto anymore. His Bankai has such a colossal drawback in this stage, and it doesn't seem to even last that long either. Also, crucially, although Komamura becomes immortal, apart from that he seems to remain the same guy for the most part. So I think if someone could outmatch him in a fight, they still would do, and although they couldn't kill him, they could still cut off an arm or two. That's why for me this is an honourable mention. But I'll be honest, as someone who's a big fan of Komamura and his Bankai in general, I'm just really glad to be able to put him on a list like this in any shape or form. And our second honourable mention before we really get things going is Rukia Kuchiki's Haka no Togame, one of the brand new Bankai we see in the final arc. Now, we only get to see it once in the manga, but it's already really impressive. She simply activates her Bankai and transforms into this amazing Ice Queen looking design, but it's actually the damage it deals that we're really looking at here. She's facing off against Asnot, who I would say is roughly an upper mid-tier Sternritter. I ranked him as 13 overall in my top most powerful Sternritters list, and she kills him in a single hit. Not only that, but he's also in the kind of ultimate monstrous form of his holy form, so that kind of makes it even more impressive. It seems like all she does is send out an area of effect wave of absolutely freezing cold ice that just freezes you down to your very core and kills you almost immediately, but I think she also does do a sword swing as well, as Az is missing the top half of his head. Regardless, the destructive power here is undeniable. She kills him flat, like there's literally nothing he can do about it. He's instantly frozen to the very core and crumbles away to nothing. The reason she's only an honourable mention and not further up this list is because her actual versatility here is not great, and it's fair enough because as far as we're concerned this is almost essentially the first time she's ever used Bankai. However, if she does use Bankai, she essentially can't really move afterwards for fear of shattering her own body. She has to very slowly and gracefully release the Bankai. So on the off chance her enemy actually survived that initial blast, she would be in serious trouble. Rukia's one where I think for now she fits here in the honourable mentions, but given time, given a chance to mature and use her Bankai like say she does in Brave Souls where she can jump around and run around with it, I think she would be probably higher up this list, maybe even close to top 5 with sheer just absolute killing blow power. But for now I'm happy with her being in the honourable mentions. Starting the list off proper at number 10 is Renji Abarai's new Bankai, Soho Zabimaru. Much like the majority of people who already had existing Bankai, Renji gets a kind of overhaul to his Bankai in the final arc, making it, in my opinion, considerably more physically impressive, even if its design leaves a little to be desired as far as I'm concerned. But in terms of its actual strength, it's clearly not to be messed with. Renji's going up against Mask de Masculine, a Sternritter who has already wiped out 2 Vizard level captains, and once he activates Bankai, he just completely dominates this fight. He's able to snap Mask's arm like it's a twig between the fingers of his new kind of ape arm that he has, fling Mask into a building, and then literally finish him off with just a couple of moves, stabbing Mask through the gut, and then just basically incinerating his body using this massive ability called Zaga Teppo, where after he's stabbed Mask and Mask can no longer escape, he clamps down on him with these huge fiery snake jaws. It's undeniably really, really cool, but the strength here is immense. Basically, Master Masculine has been toying with people the entire time he's been around, and then when Renji activates Bankai, he deals with him in about 6 pages flat. So for me, although Renji's Bankai seems to be mostly about physical strength with very few gimmicks, that strength is undeniable and a huge boost over his previous form. Coming in at number 9 is one of the most versatile Bankai on this list, and that's Hitsugaya Toshiro's Daiguren Hyorin Maru. Daiguren Hyorin Maru is kind of categorized as this Bankai that doesn't seem to be able to kill anything, but has an ability for every single situation. It seemed in every fight Hitsugaya had, he gained a new ability suitable for battle, and that's what I mean when I say it's incredibly versatile. Whether he's using Hyoten Hyakoso to bring essentially an army of snow flowers down upon his opponent to freeze them in this icy tomb, or he's using moves like Guncho Surara or Horyu Senbi to attack his enemies, Hitsugaya literally does have an ability for every situation. Also, let's not forget the main change Hitsugaya's Bankai undergoes, his absolute maturity into adult Hitsugaya during the final battle of the final arc. And this of course is incredibly impressive, enabling him to freeze even Gerard Valkyrie, flash freeze him in literally a few seconds. And not only that, but the ice in this form allows him to nullify abilities like Gerard's Hoffnung, where he simply cuts the sword in half. My main reason for keeping Hitsugaya's Daigoren Hyorin-maru down at 9th on this list then is because it lacks any killing power whatsoever. I tried to do a bit of research going into this, and Hitsugaya uses his Bankai I think against 7 different enemies during Bleach. Aizen, Kangdu, Xiaolong, Lupi, Harabel, Gerard, and Mayuri, and he only kills one of them. And he only kills Xiaolong because he stabs him in the throat. The ice is just a secondary thing. So unfortunately, unlike Rukia's Bankai, who seems to be able to kill pretty much anyone she goes against, Hitsugaya's Bankai basically freezes the surface layer and then doesn't seem to be able to do much after that. So for me, I'm happy having him here at 9th. He has a ton of abilities at his disposal, but apart from that, he doesn't seem to be able to follow through. At number 8, we have Hitsugaya's main contemporary Byakuya Kuchiki with his Bankai Senbonzakura Kageyoshi. Once again, this is an incredibly versatile Bankai, similar to Hitsugaya's in that it has a ton of abilities, but different from Hitsugaya in that it can actually follow through and has great killing power as well. Byakuya's Bankai is separated into a number of different abilities, whether that's Senkei, Gokei, Shukei, Haku Tekken. It's incredible, and the power on display is immense. But it's not just power, it's all-encompassing. It's speed, it's ruthlessness, and we've seen how it can be used to devastating effect, such as when he nearly one-shots Zomari Laru even in his Resurrection with his Gokei ability. Similarly to Daigoren Hyorin-maru, Senbonzakura Kageyoshi is a Bankai we have been exposed to again and again in Bleach, and I do feel like that has lessened its impact somewhat. However, it's undeniable that it is an absolute killing machine with just an incredible amount of abilities under its belt, and like I said, the versatility and speed on show here earn it a place in the top 10. At number 7 on this list, we have Gin Ichimaru's Kamishini no Yari. Now, Kamishini no Yari is an interesting Bankai. I was really disappointed by it the first time it was shown off in the manga. Gin was kind of just like, oh, it can basically just extend to 13 kilometers, and I was like, really, that's it? It seemed really unwieldy, even though he did cut a huge swath of Karakura Town in half in one blow. The real strength of Kamishini no Yari, however, lies in Gin's deception, and the way this Bankai seems to be able to just do more and more as time goes on. Although Gin himself is playing with viewer expectations here and claiming that his Zanpakuto is not actually the fastest or the longest, it does seem to excel in both of those areas, covering enormous amounts of ground, but also retracting immediately back to his hand so he can fight at close quarters as well. And it's this, again, versatility that puts it this high on the list. However, there is one last thing that Gin's Bankai can do, which is truly impressive, and that's his ultimate ability where his sword turns to dust for a brief period and then leaves a part of itself in its target. From that point on, it excretes a very dangerous venom that can pretty much kill anybody, as we see when it basically kills a transcended Aizen, separating his entire body in half. Aizen would have died there and then had it not been for the Hogyoku resurrecting him. So Gin's Bankai is crazy because he can just do so much with it. It even has more standard abilities like Buto and Buto Renjin to give it that range coverage. But for me, it's Gin's Bankai, the versatility it has, but also the fact that it can basically kill God, nets it a place on this list. It's also so easy as well for him to activate that final ability, it seems. He just literally has to stab someone. As long as he wants to use that power, it will leave a piece of it inside them and they'll basically be killed. The Bankai at 6th on this list, just missing out on a spot on the top 5, is Mayuri Kurotsuchi's new improved Bankai, Konjiki Ashisogi Jizo Matai Fukuin Shodai. As I said earlier with Renji's Bankai, a lot of people with existing Bankai got upgrades and overhauls in the final arc, and Mayuri's is easily one of the most impressive. His Bankai has taken on a completely new form at this point, resembling some gigantic, weird, almost like twisted Buddha statue or something, but it looks incredibly monstrous. However, its ability is even more warped, as it gives birth to essentially the previous form of Mayuri's Bankai, one of those kind of screaming golden babies. Now, what's ridiculous about this Bankai is it doesn't actually seem to have really many abilities of its own, but it has one all-encompassing power that helps it really stand out from the rest. Mayuri essentially is able to dictate the abilities of this the baby that comes out of his Bankai, and it is generated to counter whatever he is fighting. So it was kind of a running joke that Mayuri could always counter his opponent. It didn't matter what they could do, he would have some kind of preparation on hand where he would be able to fight back against whatever they had for him, and that was literally personified in his new Bankai. He can counter anyone and anything because he can just simply make the ability of whatever his baby has counter his opponent. So we get to see this against Pernida Pankajaz. This is the only time we see it, unfortunately. But Pernida's abilities are basically nerves that as long as it touches your skin, it can then control your body. However, Mayuri creates this baby that can shed its skin eternally, essentially, so that it can forever avoid Pernida's nerves. And that's why Mayuri gets this place at 6th, because, you know, how do you counter that which can counter you no matter what? You know, so the only reason I haven't ranked him higher on this list is because I think it has a couple of drawbacks. It kind of seems like he can only create one, this sounds so weird, but he can only create one baby at a time. We never actually see the gigantic actual Bankai again itself after it births this first baby, so I'm guessing it just disappears maybe, and Mayuri has to activate it again, I don't know entirely. But also the babies themselves seem to be able to be physically destroyed, such as when Pernida rips itself out of the baby with the arrows. So yeah, I don't entirely know what's going on because this Bankai only ever gets one use here, but to me they seem like distinct weaknesses of the Bankai, and its counter ability is incredibly impressive, but that's pretty much all it can actually do. Whether it can still release poison gas, whether it still has all the blades that his old Bankai used to have, unfortunately we don't know. Starting off the top 5, we have Kenpachi Zaraki's unnamed Bankai. Talking about raw power, this is power incarnate, cranking Kenpachi's already massive physical strength up to 11, but also his speed as well, allowing him to cut through Gerard Valkyrie and his shield like butter while running rings around him. Kenpachi's power in this form is so immense that when Yachiru tried to release more of it, it ripped Kenpachi's own arm off, which admittedly is a pretty big downside at this part in the story anyway. We really don't get to see this Bankai for very long, so it's difficult to discern what its limits are. However, it does seem like it also removes any kind of mental capacity Kenpachi actually had, reducing his ability to strategize at all. And some of you might think that doesn't really mean anything because Kenpachi is a hack and slash loving guy anyway, but he has been known to strategize during his fights. He's smarter, I think, than a lot of people give him credit for. And removing that capacity entirely does seem like a bit of a weakness, turning him instead into an animalistic beast who relies on instinct only. That being said, this Bankai is, of course, insanely impressive, cutting through Gerard, like I said, like he's nothing. However, this is also Gerard in base form. We never actually get to see Kenpachi really fighting his holy form, unfortunately, which is a big shame because his Bankai is for some reason immediately written out of the fight after this by a pretty contrived measure. For me, I'm happy with Kenpachi at 5 because his Bankai seems to be quite limited in what it can do. It doesn't really have any broken special abilities or anything like that. It's just all about raw power and raw speed. And I think that plus his lack of actual cognitive thought in this stage would give him trouble against some of the more tricky Bankai we're about to come up against in the top 5, but I'm happy having him here. I think he deserves his spot. Speaking of tricky Bankai, we have number 4, which is Shunsui Kyoraku's Katen Kyokotsu Karamatsu Shinju. Definitely one of the weirder Bankai on this list, difficult even to really describe. I'm not entirely sure how it links to his original Shikai, where he can make children's games a reality. This one seems to make essentially a theatre play reality, which I guess has the same theatrical flair. But either way, this Bankai is an odd one, and it did disappoint a lot of people when it was first revealed because it wasn't particularly straightforward, but essentially it's telling this, I think it's a tragic Japanese story about two lovers who commit suicide essentially beneath this black pine tree. And thematically, I do really like it, but we're not here to talk about thematics. Shunsui is going up against Leal Barrow, who is one of 2 Sternritter who essentially are immortal angels of God, which does again skew just how strong this Bankai actually is. But it seems like, to me anyway, if Kyoraku is able to get all 4 stages of this Bankai to activate, it's a guaranteed kill. He basically wins the fight. So the first stage of Kyoraku's Bankai is the sharing of wounds. If either you or your opponent has an injury, it will be replicated on your opponent. And if you're afflicted by that, if you get hit by your opponent's injury, the second stage activates on you, which gives you the plague, essentially. You just get the plague, you get covered in boils, blood runs down your face. It looks pretty nasty, I'm not gonna lie. After that, Kyoraku plunges them both into Dangyo's abyss, essentially just a massive ocean of water. They're right at the bottom of it, and at this point it becomes almost like an endurance test where your Reiatsu begins to run out. But not only that, but the moment you hit the icy cold water, your resolve also begins to run out as well. And we see Leal trying to escape to the surface only to find it impossible to do so. At this point, Kyoraku is able to activate his 4th and final stage, where he basically creates this string of white light around his opponent's neck, and he then cuts their head off. It cuts their throat, their head basically blows up. So it should be an instant kill against anybody, while telling this story at the same time. However, Leal Barrow is not your average enemy. If he had done it to Stark, it probably would have killed him. Probably would have just cut his head off and that would have been it. However, Leal regenerates his head and turns into some eldritch abomination to keep fighting. But I think Kyoraku's Bankai deserves its place here. It's difficult to quantify, exactly what this Bankai does, exactly how it works. It has multiple abilities that all kind of feed into this one story. So, it has the power to drain Reiatsu, it has the power to drain Resolve, it has the power to inflict your own injuries upon your opponent, it has the power to give them the plague, and finally it has the power of instant kill. So I think it deserves its spot here on the top 4. It's so weird and situational that I don't feel like it can really go any higher. In many ways, it feels like a liability, which is kind of how Katen Kyokotsu feels to Kyoraku at times, but like he has to make sure that nobody's around or else they'll get caught up in it as well. And then you get essentially put through the ringer. And what's kind of weird is Katen Kyokotsu has always been this Shikai that plays fair. Like Kyoraku can get affected by it as well, as we saw with Iro Oni. However, here we don't get any adverse effects on Kyoraku whatsoever, and I think the reason for that is because he doesn't get hit by the shared wounds at the start, because Leal is not injured until the Bankai shows up. But anyway, it's a difficult one to place because it's so weird, so situational. Does it go all the way to step 4 every time, or if you have no wound, say Kyoraku has no wounds on him, and he uses Bankai, and Leal wasn't hit by any reflected wounds, would the Bankai just stop? Would that be the end of it? There are a lot of unanswered questions, unfortunately, here, but I'm happy putting it at 4th. I think its killing potential, based off what we know, is immense, and its abilities are just broken, so I'm happy putting it here. Alright, top 3 now, and with this one, I wasn't even sure about putting them on the list. I've got to be honest, I found it a really weird one to place. I wasn't sure the evidence was there for me to put it this high or even on the list, but in the end, I chose to put it here anyway. I think it is fitting, and that is, you probably maybe can guess, but Ichigo's true Zangetsu, true Tensor Zangetsu. The long-awaited true Bankai of Ichigo, which we basically don't get to see. Unfortunately, the moment he activates it, it is broken in the future by Yhwach and smashed in half. And we barely get to see it do anything in the future. However, the crucial bits we do see, I think, are enough to put it as the 3rd strongest Bankai on this list. In my opinion, it can't go any higher because we really don't know anything else it can do. If it can do anything else, maybe it can't. But Yhwach clearly fears this Bankai. Yhwach, by the way, being the ultimate god of the series at this point, the almighty, he's basically the Soul King, the most powerful being in the universe at this point, fears Ichigo's Tensor Zangetsu enough to break it in half. That's a pretty sterling recommendation of strength. However, it's not evidence. That evidence comes later on, however, when Ichigo stabs Yhwach in the back with his newly reforged Tensor Zangetsu, activates Getsuga Tensho and cuts him in half. Bear in mind, this is almighty Yhwach, the most powerful form of this character. He's just defeated Aizen essentially, like punched a hole in Aizen's chest, and Ichigo kills him in one hit. His Bankai kills Yhwach in one hit. He cuts him in half with Getsuga Tensho, and Yuha's body is just evaporated. Now obviously he survives, but he only survives because of the Almighty. He does actually say that he has died. He says, "I can rewrite futures in which I have died," so that implies that Ichigo kills him here. So Ichigo's brand new Bankai is capable of killing the god of the universe in a single stroke. That's pretty impressive. That's pretty impressive as far as I'm concerned, and it took me a little while to come round to that and actually realise what was going on, the gravity of what had just happened. But yeah, Ichigo's Bankai, can walk the walk, I think, when it actually gets a chance to. It's just such a shame that it's so messed around with at the end of the series. I'd have loved to have actually seen it in action properly, but I think the small snippets we do get are enough to put it at this kind of level on the list. Number 2 is admittedly one of my favourite Bankai in the series, and that's Kisuke Urahara's Kanon Biraki Benehime Aratame. Now, in my opinion, this is the most versatile Bankai in the series, and I think there's no question about it. I think this Bankai can essentially do anything. It can basically control reality, and that's absolutely perfect for a character like Kisuke, who always has an answer to every situation. When he activates his Bankai, it summons the massive statue of Benehime behind him, and she basically controls this range where she can manipulate reality. That's essentially what's going on. Askin has destroyed Kisuke's eyes at this point. They are dead. That's the power of Gift Ring. It kills anything it touches. However, thanks to his Bankai, Kisuke is able to restructure his own eyes and get his sight back. What's interesting here is we see there's a comparison to be had here between, say, Kisuke and Mayuri's Bankai. Mayuri's Bankai produces one counter to his enemy, perfectly suited for the fight it's in. However, in the short space of time we see Kanon Biraki Benehime Aratame, Kisuke adapts about 3 different things in quick succession. He splices open Askin's arm, he turns his own arm into something more physically powerful, by which he then smacks Askin away. That's a really cool moment, actually. Basically, Kisuke is able to restructure his own body to make it physically stronger. And then we also see that he restructures a hole in the Gift Berike and then puts a hole beside Askin, and it's essentially like teleportation. That's what I think, anyway. There's a bit of confusion about this. I think some people think that Kisuke just simply made a path for Grimmjow to follow. However, I think when Askin collapses to the ground, you do actually see a hole in the floor behind him. So I think Grimmjow popped up out of it like a portal, essentially, and punched Askin in the back. We'll obviously be able to tell better in the anime, hopefully, but I think he essentially connected 2 different doorways, and Grimmjow just went straight through and came out the other side. Regardless, it's incredibly powerful, and the thing with Kisuke's Bankai is truly, it's a cliche to say, but truly the possibilities are limitless. Kisuke could probably restructure his legs and make himself run incredibly fast, restructuring them to jump incredibly high. I wish we'd had more time with it. But I think the unlimited potential of this Bankai makes it easily the second strongest on this list. It can feasibly do anything and counter nearly anyone and make Kisuke himself indestructible. Could he restructure his skin to make him impervious to damage? Maybe, I don't know. He never is really in trouble after using his Bankai. And like I said, it would have been great to see it a bit more. However, there doesn't really seem to be a noticeable downside either. We don't get to spend enough time with it to work out if there is a downside, but he's able to just do so much with it, and it's so easy for him to control. And I do think it's perfect for a puppet master like Kisuke to have a Bankai that has all these strings attached and can just play with the world around him as though it's his plaything. I think it's incredibly powerful and nigh on unbeatable, to be honest, because he can just do anything. And I mentioned this in my Urahara Bankai video. I think it's perfect for him. I think it's so good that it has one ability, but that ability can do everything. Really, really smart. And we've made it to number 1 on the list, and by now you can probably work out who it is. The person I gave the #1 strongest Zanpakuto to also has the strongest Bankai in my opinion, as I believe they were designed by Kubo to be unbeatable, and that is Yamamoto Genryusai's Zanka no Tachi. Zanka no Tachi is the perfect offense, the perfect defense, and just also has range and kind of area of effect and just everything built in to make it the unstoppable killing machine that it actually is. Let's go through it, shall we? Perfect offense. This Bankai has a running theme going through it where it removes things from existence. With Zanka no Tachi East, simply touching the tip of the blade will remove a section of earth from existence. It just gets rid of it. There's no fire or anything, it's just immediately removed from the plane of existence that they're on. So, okay, that's pretty mad. The perfect defense, Zanka no Tachi West, creates a flaming cloak around Yamamoto himself with the heat of the sun. Yhwach, or at least the fake Yhwach, tries to strike him and it just evaporates his sword, like his blade is no longer there. Again, that theme of removing things from existence, that's something that Kubo is really playing up here. And it goes well with Ryujin Jaka's initial release command, reduce all creation to ash. That's basically what's going on here. So at this point, you've got someone who can remove things from existence by touching them, and also someone who will remove you from existence if you try and touch him. Perfect offense and perfect defense. There's still 2 more abilities to go. So he also has Zanka no Tachi North, which is essentially just one hell of a sword swing, but there is some range to it. That's his kind of ranged angle. He flings what's basically like a fiery Getsuga Tensho, I'm assuming. And again, it removes things from existence in its path. You see the fake Yhwach just has a huge hole missing from him. There's no fire or anything, it's just all completely gone. And then finally there is of course Zanka no Tachi South, which summons an undead army of people Yamamoto has killed in the past to kind of act as a mobile defensive wall almost. They don't seem to be able to do any real damage necessarily, but they cling on to Yhwach, they just crawl all over him. There's hundreds of them, it looks like, just grappling with this guy, slowing him down, making it more difficult for him to fight. And that's why, to me, Yamamoto just has the perfect, most powerful Bankai in the series. And I think it was obviously, in my opinion, designed to be that way. It was designed to be unstoppable. That's the whole point. It does seem to tire him out. That's maybe the only downside. It could also be a side effect of the fact he's thousands of years old at this point. But Zanka no Tachi is truly incredible and really did justice to the head captain. You know, Ryujin Jaka was always the show-stopping spectacle Shikai. Every time it was released, it was this crazy moment. And I think Kubo managed to achieve that again with his Bankai, giving him the 4 points of the compass, making up the ultimate all-rounder character, the most powerful fighting force in Bleach, as far as I'm concerned anyway. I just don't think anyone could get close to him, and even if they did, he would remove them from existence. His army of skeletons would be slowing them down. I'm perfectly happy to put Zanka no Tachi at #1 on the list. But that's it for my list of the top 10 strongest Bankai in Bleach. Let me know in the comments below if you agree at all with any of my positions. I'd love to know. I'd also love to know your lists as well, so put them in the comments below too, and we can compare and see just how close we actually were. Alright guys, but I really hope you enjoyed the video. Make sure to hit that subscribe button now and keep supporting me and the channel. I really, really appreciate it. But until next time guys, I'll catch you later, and I'll see you then.